every aspect of your child's life was just being filmed, put on YouTube for millions to see. And that's just something that's not really natural. Because imagine like growing up, right? Like when I was growing up, we didn't really have social media. We had, I think like Zanga was a thing when I was like middle school. And then it was like MySpace. And then finally it blew up into like Facebook, right? But growing up, we didn't really put our lives out on the internet. We sort of did in vlogs. There was like some pictures, or not vlogs, blogs. And there were some pictures that you can upload, but it didn't really feel super invasive. It just felt like a network of just you, your friends, and maybe like people within the surrounding area, like, schools in the area. And you were sharing stuff. It was kind of like a diary entry, but it's not like what social media is today. So imagine growing up, as a teenager, and your life is all over YouTube, on TikTok, whatever it is. We've had some awkward moments growing up as teenagers, especially. Would you really want to have like you going through puberty being filmed for people to see, right? All the things that you've done as a child, the mistakes that you made, just being silly, like it's just all broadcast for everyone to see. And the fuel for that was because your family was making money. You start realizing that, oh, I'm surrounded by nicer things. We can afford to go to vacations now. We can have nice stuff. We can have our own rooms. All of that is nice, but you're really losing out on childhood. You got your parents like pushing the camera in your face and stuff like that. It's crazy. But I read Shari Franke's book. It's available on Amazon, and also there is an Audible that's available as well, where she reads it to you. She narrates it. You can hear it in her tone, which I think would be really cool. I didn't know about it. I just read the book when I got it. I saw today when I was looking up the pictures of the cover of the book, where I was like, oh wait, she did an Audible thing. I think it'd be really cool. So you guys should definitely check it out. Get her book if you can. Like I said, it's on Amazon. Or if you're one of those like people that like to multitask, like to do things, have things in the background, get her Audible, because I think it'd be really cool to hear her own story in her own voice. That way, because like when I was reading the book, I felt like the words, like they did such a good job. Her team, the words on the pages were just so palpable that you could just really feel her intense like pain, the sadness that she felt towards her family, mom, disappointment with Kevin Franke, or her fear with this guy in the book that you'll learn about, who was essentially a predator and just a horrible fucking person. Yeah, I mean, like I understand the appeal of family vlogging though, because like if you come from a disruptive family background where you don't really have an anchor in your life, you don't really have your mom in your life, your dad in your life, maybe you don't have siblings, so you might turn to family vlogging for people on YouTube, these influencers, as a way to have some sort of like a familial connection, right? It could be something that stems out of loneliness, or just you just want like a family. Everyone wants to have a nice family to be with, and so sometimes when you're watching on family vlogs, you're just like, oh, it feels like you're part of something, and it's so nice to see a nice wholesome family, right? A good healthy relationship between like a mom and a father, and then the children. But the thing is, you don't understand what's happening behind the scenes. It's just like any other social media thing where you're only seeing the highlights of it. You're seeing a curated, the best of the highlights that people will want you to see. You don't get to see what's going on behind the scenes. And what's really interesting about her book is that I really wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes when they were doing the YouTube stuff, especially. I wanted to know how Ruby was like growing up, because, we made a lot of assumptions about Ruby from looking at a lot of the viral videos that she basically got shit on. We made a lot of assumptions about Ruby, about how, she may have already had this behavior instilled in her that was abusive before she met Jodi, right? And what's interesting is that, when Ruby and Jodi were at their sentencing, Ruby really took the stance of like, oh, like I've realized what happened. I'm changed now. I've no longer had that contact, I guess, with Jodi, and she felt like she like woke up from a spell and like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this to my kids. But it's like, I don't know, Ruby. A lot of people already have an inkling that you were already abusive to begin with. All right, so I got my notes here. I think we're gonna go through probably about like halfway through the book. And like I mentioned before, you guys should definitely get this book on Amazon, order it, get it on Kindle, get the Audible, because the cool thing with the Audible is that she narrates it. All right, we start with chapter 1, Sealed. So in this chapter, we learned about the background story of Ruby, Kevin, basically how they met, how they got married. The wild thing about this is that I didn't know they got married within 2 years. No, not 2 years. 2 years. Within, I think, 2 weeks of meeting each other. Like they were moving along really, really fast, which is wild. So Ruby, she was born in January 18, 1982 from Logan, Utah. She was the first children of 5 to Chad and Jennifer Griffiths, whose family has already been a devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for generations. Oh, by the way, did you guys watch Heretic by any chance? Oh my gosh. Heretic is this new A24 movie that is now, I think it's out in theaters, but I think it's out now. Where the two main characters, they're from the LDS, and they basically knock on this guy's door, Hugh Grant, and they go through this whole, I don't know, it's such a wild, crazy movie. Not as crazy as Substance though with Demi Moore, but I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys can check it out. As the eldest in a strict conservative home, Ruby's childhood was less about play and more about responsibility. She was tasked with helping to raise her youngest siblings. I can easily imagine a young Ruby, spine straight, eyes determined, navigating her family's expectations with a sense of righteous purpose, eagerly anticipating the day when she would have a family of her own, relishing the thought of finally being able to make the rules and shape her home exactly as she saw fit. For Ruby, motherhood wasn't just a future role, it was a pinnacle of her aspirations, the one thing that she'd always wanted for herself above all else. Which to me, I mean, honestly, if you're the type of person who lived by rules and you thrived in control, I can imagine why you want to start a household where, you know, when you start having your own mini-me's, what can you do? You can control them. You're basically the arbiter of the rules. And I think that for Ruby just gave her a sense of purpose. So this is just basically a background of trying to understand Ruby. So now we're in the year of 2000. Ruby's 18 years old at this point, where she's at the Utah State University camp. However, she had one thing in her mind: manhunting. Yes, she chosen accounting as her major, but college was never really about learning for Ruby. It was about finding a mate so that she can get married, start a family, and begin fulfilling her divine purpose ASAP. And so this is where we learn about Kevin Franke. So Kevin Franke was a senior. He was living on campus at the time, about, I think, 4 years older than Ruby Franke. So he was 22. Now, Kevin was described as someone who had a very laid back aura. He had no interest. Ruby had no interest in power struggles after all. What she needed was someone relaxed enough to let her take the reins without too much resistance. A co-pilot content to let her navigate their shared journey, pay the bills, and give her the children that she longed for. And I think that is a perfect description of Kevin Franke, because it would explain why there was his absence, during the time where his family probably needed it most. You know, I know that he was being controlled by Jodi Hildebrandt and stuff like that. But still, Kevin Franke was always there with the family before Jodi even came in the picture, right? So Kevin was born on October 9, 1978 in Ogden, Utah. Kevin was the youngest of 7 siblings. So I think that's very interesting to kind of look at. So we have Ruby here, who was the oldest, probably the bossy one, right? Then we have Kevin here, who was the youngest. He probably didn't have any younger siblings to boss around, and maybe he was used to being telling what to do. So that's kind of interesting to see. We have the oldest marrying the youngest, trailing his nearest brother by a full 12 years. Now, this was what kind of led to them getting married, I guess. It's a very weird story. So Ruby was, to me, it already seems like Ruby was already kind of weird from the get-go. So here's one story about Ruby. One evening, Kevin was sitting next to Ruby, holding her hand under a blanket as they watched a movie with some friends. Kevin couldn't care less what was happening on the screen. All he can think about was her softness of her skin. I know this person get a little bit cringe, but you got to remember that they're young, they're in love, possibly, maybe. Okay, so it's gonna be a little cringe here, and think about Ruby in this way. It's kind of like, ugh, but bear through it. You guys can do it. All he could think about was the softness of her skin, the gentle pressure of her grip, the occasional brush of her thumb across his knuckles. Each sensation was electric, sending shivers up his arm and straight to his core. Then Kevin glanced over and noticed another guy, one of Ruby's admirers, sitting way too close to her on her other side. His stomach dropped when he realized Ruby was holding this guy's hands under the blanket too. Usually so level-headed, Kevin jumped up, his face burning, his heart racing. And then he storms out, and then Ruby chases after him. I'm like, what kind of person was Ruby? Why? She was 18 at this time. Yes, you're young, you're growing, you're maturing, but I mean, you have 2 guys that are interested in you, and then you're secretly holding both of their hands under the blanket. And maybe for I don't know. She grew up in a very religious household. I don't see how this could be acceptable in any way. Like, that just, she did out there hoeing. So here's what happened the next day. Kevin ended up talking to Ruby and laid down the law. No more holding hands with other guys, period. Ruby, attracted to his passion for her, fast-tracked Kevin to meet the Griffiths, her parents and toughest critics. They approved. Kevin, in turn, introduced Ruby to meet his parents, the Frankes, who thought Ruby seemed like a lovely young lady. Perfect for their son. 2 weeks after the day they met, Ruby cut to the chase. So are we getting married? She asked. Oh, 2 weeks. It is, right? 2 weeks, 14 days. Okay, so Kevin caught off guard uttered the most dangerous word in the dictionary. Yes. I can't believe it. In just 14 days, they had gone from strangers to engaged. All right, so I guess it's not the same thing as married, but still, like getting engaged within 2 weeks of knowing someone. Oh boy, I don't know. Like, even when I hear people getting engaged after like a year or two and like they haven't lived with each other yet, I'm like, man, how do you know who you're like marrying? Especially when you move in with someone, you could be living with like a complete monster. And when I say monster, I don't mean like a serial killer or anything like that. I mean like someone who is dirty as fuck and you're just like, oh my God, this person has like gross habits. I don't know how I'm going to be able to deal with this. Wild. But you know, it happens. And you know, sometimes it happens and it works out, right? But for this, it's just like, damn it, 2 weeks after getting engaged, that just seems really, really crazy to me. Now, at this point, Shari is born, and Shari talks about essentially what it was like having Ruby as a mother. Now, we're obviously going to get that entire narrative throughout the entire book. However, it's interesting to hear how Ruby treated Shari even when she was a baby. Because usually, like, when you have your first baby, you know, you might spoil your baby a little bit. You're, like, fawning over your first child. But no, not Ruby. It seems like Ruby kind of already had she was already a hard ass to begin with. So Ruby didn't believe in comforting me when I was a baby, not in the way most parents do. Why would she? Her family's philosophy has always been it doesn't hurt a baby to cry things out, which I understand, but it depends on, you know, do you take it too far? Babies shouldn't be coddled. Tantrums should not be tolerated. It's for their own good, so they know who's their boss. And when they grow up, they can learn to handle whatever life throws at them without being weak, losers, or crybabies. Yet, ironically, my earliest memories of Ruby are crying. Oh, my earliest memories are of Ruby crying. She had tears for every occasion, joy, sorrow, boredom. It doesn't matter. Ruby wept through it all, a woman perpetually at odds with her own equilibrium. Perhaps that's why she wanted so many children, a set of Russian nesting dolls, each one slightly smaller version of the last to absorb the tsunami of her raging emotions. For what better way to fill the gaping void than to surround yourself with adoring little mini-me's? Interesting, though, how someone who cried so much seemed entirely immune to the tears of others, including mine. Because I wasn't sure if Ruby was initially doting on Shari when she was first born, maybe her first children, but then at some point when she started having like her fourth children, fifth children, sixth children, she started getting overwhelmed, and maybe at some point she was like, oh my God, this is like crazy, and like maybe she just became more immune to you know, feeling like emotional love for her children or something. I don't know, but it seems like she was already like this from the get-go. If my tears had been met with comfort instead of calculated indifference, would I have grown into someone more open, less guarded? This chapter is pretty sad. I mean, all the chapters are really sad, but this one is titled, Mommy Isn't Very Nice to Me. So here she talks about how Ruby initially started on the internet. So it all started with not on YouTube. It all started with her having a blog, and blogs were pretty big back then. So like there was like fashion blogs, there was like cooking blogs. I guess there was like family blogs as well. But with Ruby, what she would do was she would have these like recipe blogs, right? Now in her blogs, I think something about Shari tells me that she was already kind of like very intuitive from the get-go. Like she was the type of person who was like, you know, very young. At a very young age, she was able to kind of like understand the adults around her, probably because she had to act in as an adult herself rather than really be a child. So here's one of Ruby's blogs. My main goal for this blog is to journal our family's growth and experiences. Ruby proclaimed on her new shiny blogger profile. I want my children to have a place on the internet to go and enjoy reading about themselves to see how they've progressed. Yeah, look at how it all ended up now. I don't think any of her children would ever revisit any of the vlogs that they made, even go back to any of the blogs that were written about them, because if anything, look at the progress of Ruby. Ruby went from, this like fake, very fake, like, I'm mother of the year type of person to being an abuser who is now jailed. So it'll be interesting for Ruby to, really reflect back on how she started and where she ended up right now. But I don't know. With Ruby, I do get Lori Vallow vibes where I do think that she lives in delusions. She's going to need a lot of therapy to really, get her out of that. She just wanted whoever who would say, will you marry me first? Yeah, possibly. And she found that one person. So she had a recipe-filled blog. She wanted to forge a connection with people by sharing her recipes for raspberry butter, honey lime chicken, and trail mix cookies, painting a picture of a home filled with constant aroma of freshly baked bread and a lovingly prepared meals. The truth is, I'm not sure she ever made those dishes. Sure, Ruby was always baking something, but most of the recipes on Good Looking Home Cooking, that was her blog page, by the way, were aspirational rather than realistic, part of an image, that of a smiling, flour smudge mama. I think there is a picture of Ruby in the kitchen where she's got like flour smudge on her. It's like her in the moment. She's like cooking or something. And, on the internet, it looks like a really good picture, but, a lot of that stuff usually is curated. A flour smudge mama, the gaggle of cherubs gathered around the table. Even at this early stage of her online career, Ruby was showing her a willingness to sacrifice authenticity on the altar of appearances. She's not the only one. There's a lot of people who do that. So it seems like Ruby had always had this very strict parenting instilled within her. So obviously it was probably because of like how her parents were. It seems like that was kind of like hinted at. But we don't really get too much of like Ruby's childhood or anything like that. But Ruby would have Shari wake up 6 a.m., sit in front of the piano, and basically demand her to play the piano. And whenever, Shari wasn't performing to Ruby's liking, Ruby would essentially, start hitting her, yelling at her, berating her, and things like that. I quickly learned that anything less than unbridled enthusiasm would trigger Ruby into a rage. One hint of displeasure in my face, and whack, a smack on my arm, a flick to my lips, or a sharp tug on my ear. I rarely cried when Ruby punished me. Only one person in this house was allowed to shed tears, and it wasn't me. So I kept quiet, maintained a neutral expression. But beneath the calm exterior, a realization was taking root. Mommy isn't very nice to me. And I don't know if this is just attributable, because like initially I was just like, okay, well, young mothers maybe are still kind of like maturing. Like imagine being in your 20s and having children, like when I was in my 20s, like I was very impatient, very immature, and I couldn't imagine trying to discipline the kid, right? So for Ruby, it's probably a combination of like all the things. Like she was very young, she's very mature, but at the same time, she already had this like instilled strictness within her, and she probably didn't think that she was problematic at all. Mommy, I'd whimper, padding into my parents' room late at night, my stuffed horse, Bubbles, clutched to my chest. My tummy hurts again. I would plead with Ruby to leave the lights on when I went to bed, but she had no time for my antics. No, Shari, you need to learn to sleep in the dark. There are no demons in my house. She was wrong, of course. There was certainly one. Yeah, I wonder who that one demon is. And then eventually became 2 demons living in that house. Now, it's so sad to hear just exactly how fearful she was of Ruby. I'm not even going to call her mother, of Ruby. Because there's this one time where, she's with her piano recital, piano teacher, and she went through the notes, and Ruby had already said that, like, oh, you're good enough to play. You're good. Like, you've got my approval. Like, you've done this music sheet. You're good, right? There was a piano teacher who basically told Shari, oh, you're not really quite there yet, sweetie, the teacher, after hearing me play. Let's work on it for 1 more week. Hot tears pricked the corner of my eyes. I squirmed in my seat as my teacher looked at me quizzically, unused to seeing such intense reaction from a 5-year-old. What's the matter, Shari? She asked. It's just my mom thinks I'm ready, I said, voice quavering. My teacher, sensing that Pandora's box had just been opened, chose wisely to shut it. Okay, never mind. Here's a sticker. Well done. You're doing great. Next piece, new piece next week. And so it's just so wild to hear at such a young age of 5 years old that she was already so scared of Ruby. She didn't want to go against Ruby, even if there was like another adult or another like sort of authority figure. Still did not want to go against Ruby whatsoever. She didn't want anyone to contradict Ruby because she knew that she would probably be on the brunt end of it. of the anger. At 5, I knew my place instinctively. Be pliable, be obedient, shape and mold myself to whatever form would earn Ruby's conditional affection. Today, the mere thought of sitting at a piano triggers some of my earliest and deepest anxieties, all tied to my mother. It's a shame how the most beautiful things, even music, can be ruined by the shadows of our past. And yeah, that's really sad, because something as innocuous and benign as a piano or music could just easily trigger her into remembering all the times where she was forced to sit in front of a piano and she had to play. And then she would have Ruby next to her, berating her, hitting her, smacking her, stuff like that. Yeah, it's just like super sad. And that also reminds me of, I mean, I always mention this, but it really stuck with me when they were doing the victim impact statements. And, you know, George Torres's family member went up there and was like, yeah, I can't look at a suitcase the same way again. Every time I look at the suitcase, I think of George. When I zip up the suitcase, I don't zip up the suitcase all the way. I leave enough room just so if there was someone in there, they can get out. So these are the things that, you know, these victims go through, and super sad. Okay, now, if you guys remember Pam Bochner, I don't think Pam Bochner comes up yet, but you guys remember with Pam Bochner how when they went to go find the 2 older sisters and they were trying to locate them when the 2 youngest siblings were found abused at Jodi Hildebrandt's house. And so where did they find the 2 older siblings? Well, they were with, the 2 older sisters. They were with Pam Bochner. And Pam Bochner was like, yeah, like, you know, I had guests coming over and I asked if I can borrow the 2 kids to have them come over and clean my house. I don't know if it's like a Mormon thing or if it was like a connections things where you would just have your kids just clean your house for you and just basically do, I mean, like there's chores, yes, but then there's like using them as like, I don't know, like housework, you know? I don't know. I have no issues with chores. I have no issues with teaching kids how to keep a place clean, but using people's kids to be like your housemates, yeah, pretty fucking weird. Hey Yoshi, hi Go Lucky, how are you doing today? Hi Lycan, hello. Well, not quite an update, but her daughter Shari Franke has written a book, and I wanted to cover it. But with Ruby and Jodi Hildebrandt, they are still in prison, and we don't know when they're going to get out. But yeah, minimum 4 years. I hope they are in there for like 10 to 15 years minimum, at least. As soon as their children could toddle, Ruby enlisted us as her pint-sized cleaning crew. Ruby's philosophy was very simple. Everyone contributes, everyone stays busy. Idle hands were a devil's playground after all. One of her favorite tactics was the cleaning blitz. She gathered all of us in a glint of her eye and announced, all right, troops, I'm setting the timer for 1 hour. We're going to clean this house from top to bottom. Ready, set, go. We'd all scatter and whirlwind of dusting, scrubbing, tidying. It was chaotic, exhausting, and weirdly exhilarating. I don't mind being mommy's little helper, taking charge of my siblings to assist in our increasingly demanding domestic life. She mentioned that money was very tight, but Kevin's career as a geotechnical engineer was on the rise. He was generally fascinated by plate tectonics and earth liquefaction, immersing himself in an academic world where changes happen on a geological scale. So Ruby was at home taking care of the children. Kevin was the moneymaker. We're now in chapter 5. So chapter 5, we start learning a little bit about how the YouTube thing started. It was because Ruby's sister started to post videos on YouTube, and Ruby saw that, you know, starting to get views, starting to make money off of that, and she wanted to do the same as well. As she spoke, I couldn't help but think about my aunts who had started filming themselves with janky cameras, putting videos on the internet and making money out of it. We watched some of the videos together, and I wondered what it would look like if my mom started filming herself for YouTube too, like them. No, I thought, she probably wouldn't want to see people how angry she is all the time. And that's the thing. I don't think people thought that Ruby had anger issues. People probably thought that, like, oh, you know, Ruby's such a good mother. Look at the way she, like, treats her kids. She's such a good mother. She does this for them. She does that for them. She's so upbeat. She's so happy. But then behind the scenes, she was this person who was extremely, very volatile, mercurial, angry. And they were basically tiptoeing around her to make sure that they weren't getting in trouble and they wouldn't get hit by her. Ruby was always angry with us, constantly on edge, primed to blow, no matter how small the irritation. I probably could have handled her blustering if it weren't for the edge of cruelty that often colored her rages. I remember being in the bathroom experimenting with my kid's makeup palette. It must have been around 9 years old, so she had bold red lipstick on, metallic eyeshadow. Ruby called her downstairs to play the piano. Grudgingly, I took my place at the piano. I played the notes mechanically, but I couldn't bring myself to sing. Shari, why on earth aren't you singing? She snapped, her fingers stepping at the keys. I don't know, Mom. My voice was barely a whisper. Maybe you have so much makeup on your face that you've forgotten how to listen to your mother, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Perhaps I should smack it all off. Ruby's hand would always find its way to my face, a sharp sting of displeasure delivered with precision. Her slaps were calibrated never hard enough to leave bruises, at least on me, but always sufficient to instill fear. In her twisted logic, she was molding obedience, sculpting compliance with each stinging blow. I also think we were just her punching bag, a way for her to release her anger. She always seemed calmer once she had blown off steam on one of us. So it's basically just this vicious cycle. She gets really angry, she gets pent up, but Ruby has issues with emotional regulation. So what does she do? She takes it on her fucking kids. And the moment that she hits them, she feels better about herself. Super fucking sad to have to deal with a parent who's like this. But you know what? Ruby, it's not like Ruby didn't know what she was doing was wrong, because obviously she knew what she was doing was wrong because she didn't show it on video, you know? She didn't show it on YouTube. She knows. There's this one time where Chad had pranked Shari. So Chad had like a knack for pranking members of the family. And so Chad pranked Shari pretty bad, in my opinion. I think he like cut off like a chunk of her hair. And so this is what Ruby does. Ruby takes Chad, takes him to the bathroom, marches him in there with a buzzer. The bathroom door swung open and Chad shuffled out. His head hung low. Ruby had buzzed a thick, uneven stripe down the center of his head, leaving him with a harsh reverse mohawk. Tuft of his hair stuck out at odd angles, making him look like a plucked chicken. How the fuck? I don't understand. So, like, I know, like, Kevin Frankie's, like, busy at work and all that stuff. But, like, when he came home, do you not think it was really fucking weird that you came home and, like, your wife just, like, destroyed your son's hair? Like, that to me is just, like, a really fucking weird punishment. There, Ruby said, satisfied with her work. Maybe next time you'll think twice before you decide to play a barber. She looked at me, her eyes hard, and let that be a lesson to you too, Shari. In this house, we don't make excuses for other people's bad behavior. So obviously, you know, her having her hair cut by Chad was a really bad thing. But when she realized what trouble her brother was about to be in, what does she do? She tries to back her brother. And so now they're both essentially getting punished. But like, I don't know. It's like this whole like emotional abuse that's happening. It's wild because it's like, she's punishing Chad by cutting off chunks of his hair. But at the same time, it's like, look at what you made me do. It makes Shari feel bad. It makes Chad feel bad. I don't know. It's just like, it's so crazy. And these are just like such young children. We don't make excuses for other people's bad behavior. I nodded mutely, my throat too tight to speak. When Ruby went downstairs, I gathered my brother into my arms, stroking his ragged hair. I'm sorry, Chad, I whispered, feeling a sense of crush of guilt. So crazy. My mom was the queen of psychotic streaming and throwing things at us, but the phone rang and it was like a fucking switch. It was scary how quick she would change. Yeah. I remember we would get in trouble because like my mom was like a little bit crazy. I think like halfway she kind of like chilled out. But yeah, she's like snap like crazy. I remember when we would spill water and she would just like blow up on us. I can't imagine now. A child spills water. It's just fucking water. I mean, juice sucks too. Soda sucks. It's sticky. Clean it up, whatever. But like, it's an accident at the end of the day, right? We literally would spill water and then she would just like blow up on us, right? And so I remember when there was a girl that was like living with us. She also spilled water. And I was like, oh, how come you didn't yell at her? How come she's not in trouble? My mom didn't say shit. Or she might have tried to make an excuse for something. But the boomerang chancla, yeah, man, we had anything within arm's reach was yeah. That you might get hit with that. That's something you might get hit with. Chapter 7, Refuge. What are my notes for here? So the thing about this book that I find really cool is that she'll also include excerpts of her journal entries in here as well. That way it's like a reminder, you know, it's a good reminder to yourself, like how you really felt during that moment. Because sometimes when you journal entry and then years back, you go and look at it, you're like, oh shit, I forgot this happened, or I forgot that I felt this way, or I forgot this like little detail. But Shari had a practice of journal entering, doing these journal entries, and she refers to them in her book at times. So remember how Ruby and Jodi had the kids do physical labor? So it wasn't started with Jodi. It seems like physical labor was already something that was started with Jodi. And not only that, but like, you know, doing push-ups and all that seems like was something that Ruby also employed. She writes this in her journal entry. I'm so mad at my mom sometimes. Whenever she helps me practice piano, she promised not to yell. But by the time that we're done, she's screaming at the top of her lungs. She's so stressed, uptight, and strict that it's impossible for her to have fun or really relax when she's around. Now, I wonder if it's because Ruby, I don't know if Ruby really had friends. I wonder if it's because Ruby spent so much time around children that she just forgot what it felt like to be around adults. And so maybe she expected her children to be adults because she had no adult interaction, but these are children. They're growing up. I don't know if Ruby just like spent a lot of time just staying at home all day, no interaction with other adults, being around kids, and she would just be really frustrated. Like, yeah, it's probably really fucking hard to be a stay-at-home mom, taking care of, one child, two children, 3, 4, 5, but then like she had like 6, right? That's a lot of kids to be taken care of. And I'm not giving her that as an excuse, but I'm just saying that like she probably expected her children to act like adults because she wanted to have that adult companion. Mom has become obsessed with this place called West Point Military Academy. So West Point Military Academy, is that what they sent Chad to? No, right? They sent Chad to the Anasazi camp, I think. West Point Military Academy, which means she now punishes by making us conditions like soldiers. For example, earlier today, she got mad at Chad for me for not putting away the clothes. So she punished us by making us run the block 5 times. Then at dinner, Chad was hiding and refusing to help me clear the table, so Ruby made us both do push-ups. Chad was shirking his responsibilities, me for not being enough of a leader. We're now in part 2 of the book called The Ship of Fools. I think this is where their YouTube channel starts, and I think things are really... Oh, this is when she starts her YouTube channel. Chapter 8 is A Star is Born. So at this point, Ruby is 30 years old. She's got 6 kids. Last baby had been weaned, and the Franke family was now complete. Ruby's sister, Ellie and Bonnie, were already finding success on YouTube as content creators. There's a 4th sister, right? There's Ruby, Ellie, Bonnie, and who's the 4th sister? You guys remember? What was her name again? Ellie, Bonnie, Ruby. I don't remember. You guys can remind me. West Point is the officer school for the U.S. Army. I wonder... West Point. I wonder if that's where Dennis went to. How did the kids turn out so smart with them as parents? Yeah, I mean, there are people that go through traumatic shit, and it really takes a huge, they take a huge dive in their life. Sometimes they choose a different course in their life where they end up being, unproductive people. Yeah, I don't know. It's amazing how Shari came out of this so strong. With all the shit that she's gone through, having Ruby as her mother and stuff like that. It's amazing to see what kind of person Shari is now. Oh, Julie. Yeah, thank you. Julie. They all do the vlogging thing, right? I think they do. Ruby's sister Ellie and Bonnie were already finding success on YouTube as content creators. Ellie's channel, Ellie and Jared, launched in 2011, was particularly thriving, documenting her struggles with infertility. Ellie's vlogs, short for video blog, had built the following of women who saw their own longing reflected in her journey, filling her comment section with the messages of support and solidarity, holding their collective breath with each new treatment cycle. When Ellie finally got pregnant after 3 years of trying and posting about it 3 times a week, her vlog hit 1,000 subscribers. In the vlogging world, this was a significant milestone and meant YouTube started to take her seriously, opening doors for monetization through advertising, sponsorships, merchandise sales. From there, Ellie's subscriber base had grown exponentially, and with it, her income. I actually thought Ruby was the one who started the YouTube stuff first, and then people saw how successful it was, and then all her family members jumped on. But it seems like Ruby was the last person to join this, or maybe it was Julie. In January 2015, Ruby's vision materialized when the official launch of 8 Passengers on YouTube. The channel would become a stage for a family drama, a curated window into the Franke household and our everyday lives. Kevin, ever supportive, claimed the honor of being the first subscriber. Ruby was the second. And I, about to turn 12, caught in the excitement of this new family venture, eagerly claimed the 3rd spot. To me, it all seems so innocent, just a fun new project, a way to share our lives with the world. I can't believe she was 12 years old when the channel started. I thought she was a lot younger when the channel started. It's crazy that this was happening as she was like, getting into her teenage years. So at this point, we're in 2015 and Ruby starts posting on YouTube. Her first video that she posted was with the youngest sister in the starring role. We begin with the footage with her gender reveal party in 2013. In our kitchen, the family of the 5 of us children and Ruby are filmed by Kevin as we gathered around a cake on the kitchen counter, Ruby's pregnancy bump clearly visible. Kevin asked a question from behind the camera. So, what are we doing today, he asked. Cutting a cake, and inside is the color of the baby, Chad exclaims, excited. His disappointment is palpable as Ruby slices into the cake, revealing a pink sponge interior. The scene shifts to the hospital where Ruby cradles our newborn sister, her 6th and youngest child. The video then cuts to my youngest sister, now a toddler, sprawling on the kitchen table, eyeing me and my banana with unmistakable interest. She rises, her steps wobbly, but determined, takes a hearty bite when offered the fruit. Ruby's novice editing skills become apparent in the next shot, featuring our beloved yellow lab, Nolly. Charming footage, except it was upside down. 2 weeks later, Ruby dropped her second video, tasting sushi for the first time. A few days later, video number 3, meet the 8-passenger Chad. Introducing my 10-year-old blonde, blue-eyed pranks of her brother. It was cute and people liked it, and so on. My mom kept making these videos, starring us, and posting them in 8 passengers. Little did we know this bizarre ritual would become to dominate our lives for the next 7.5 years. We never chose to be internet celebrities, but that made no difference. Soon our lives now revolved around non-stop content creation, whether we liked it or not. Birthdays, barbecues, lazy Sunday afternoons, no matter what, no moment was too mundane to escape documentation. Ruby, her sisters, her brother Bo, I forgot she also had a brother as well, who'd also jump aboard the blogging bandwagon, were now constantly filming us for their respective vlogs. You couldn't sneeze without it being immortalized from multiple angles. Oh my god, dude, that's so annoying. I remember there was a time where I was like hanging out with like a lot of IRL streamers, and I couldn't imagine doing that for 7 years. Like constantly hanging around people who are always like filming things for content and then gotta get a reaction, and it's like camera facing everywhere. Like, yeah, it's a lot. It's overwhelming. But to be a child in that environment, it's in your house, it's in your private area, it's your parents that are doing it. Shouldn't be allowed. Shouldn't be allowed. Hey, Boone, how are you doing today? Ruby was cold, narcissistic, then introduced Jodi, the sociopath. What a team. I'm so proud of those kids. They got out just in time, in my opinion. But for me, a 12-year-old girl, this constant surveillance was excruciating. All I wanted was to grow up in peace, deal with my bodily changes and those pesky new zits without being recorded. But my mother was omnipresent. Her phone, an extension of her arm, directing us like a Hollywood producer. Do this, do that, Shari. We're filming. Smile, Shari. Say good morning. I was beginning to feel like a sideshow freak. Step right up and witness Shari, the amazingly awkward adolescent, in all her cringe-worthy glory. The worst part, the internet ate it up. Everyone seemed to love what Ruby was posting, which of course encouraged her to post more. She approached YouTube with the dedication of a startup CEO, putting in long hours, day after day. She had done her homework, knew what it was like in the wild west of social media. Consistency is king. You have to post regularly, which meant every little moment was mined for content. First steps, lost teeth, epic tantrums, you name it, Ruby filmed it. Laser focused on the building her subscriber base, knowing vlogging was a numbers game. And Ruby had always been good with numbers. So Ruby comes up to Shari, and basically there's a video that goes viral. I feel like a lot of people have this like moment where it's like, oh my god, my video, it went viral. I can't believe it. The internet loves it. So she goes up to Shari, and it's basically a video of her 2-year-old climbing out of the crib, and it went viral at that point. It had 50,000 viewers at some point, and then I think till this day, I think it has like, well, sorry, the channel is down now, but it went up to about like 400,000. As the numbers climb, a nagging thought kept creeping into my mind. Surely at some point, people would get bored of this. Surely one day, this would all end, and our lives would go back to normal. Little did I know that normal was a luxury we had already left far behind. Now, even though that they were having every part of their moments of their lives being filmed constantly, kids are smart. Kids know that at times you can get things out of your parents, and that's exactly what the children did. For me, every video should remain a special kind of torture I could never get used to or relax. It was like one of those recurring nightmares where suddenly naked on the stage with a sea of eyes staring back at you, mocking. I mean, puberty is brutal enough, let alone with an audience. Yeah. Hopefully, I found a silver lining in this heinous new situation. Leverage. I figured out if I wanted something from Ruby, a later bedtime, a new outfit, permission to hang out with my friends, My best bet was to ask her while the camera was rolling. Oh man. I know that like there are times when I wanted something out of my mom, and all I had to do sometimes was ask her while there were other parents around or friends were around, because she was more inclined to be nicer. She was more inclined to say yes. I mean, I think it's just a thing with parents, right? You know what you can do to get your parents to say yes to you. You knew the ideal situation. If you wanted something from your mom, if you wanted to ask for permission for something, you knew exactly when and where was the best time for that. So for the Frankie family, it was when the camera was rolling, because mom would be nicer to me if the camera's here, and mom doesn't want to say no, this is content, makes me look like a good mom. Boom boom, we have everyone wins. You got hit by a plastic shoehorn? Wait, a shoehorn? That doesn't surprise me. The funny ones were always like the cooking utensils. Like when you piss off your mom, your parents, when they're cooking, that should be flying at you. I don't know. I wonder how Ruby's doing. I wonder if she is still delusional, or have they been able to deprogram her? My best bet was to ask her while the camera's rolling. It was a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal. Ruby wanted me, her happy, smiling co-star. It was going to cost her a trip to the mall, a get out of free chores free card, a shiny new gadget, whatever I needed at the time. And what about Ruby? What might be the emotional repercussions of her snowballing online success? Yes, Ruby's drive was bringing money for her family and validation for her ego. But none of those superficial rewards could fix what was broken inside of her. Instead, they seemed to fuel a vicious cycle, pushing her to seek more validation, more views, more content, often at the expense of her family. The most problematic element in our family dynamic, Ruby's relentless ambition, fueled by her potential mixture of unresolved pain and narcissism, had become the driving force of our existence. It was as if we had taken the most poisonous plant in our garden and, instead of uprooting it, made it the centerpiece of our lives. Chapter 12, also a very sad title. I don't think my mother loves me. So imagine where you guys are right now, and you guys make content, and then you have to go through a bunch of comments, going through what people think about you, what they think you're doing right, what they think you're doing wrong, praising you, loving you, hating you. Imagine having to do that now. But imagine having to do that when you're a teenager. So Shari, of course, would see the comments that were written about her. And I can imagine, like, it's just so unnatural to get that amount of feedback coming at you, like, every day. My mind jumped to the comments I read online about myself. Words of strangers on YouTube who thought they knew me based on the carefully edited snippets of my life. Ugh, Shari's such a kiss ass. She's always ratting out her siblings and trying to be Ruby's favorite. So smug. What was that? Why Ruby didn't love me? Because I came across as a suck up, goody two shoes? Even if it was, I wish that these strangers who saw only what Ruby wanted them to see could understand that my obedience was born out of not adoration, but fear. If only they knew the real me, I thought. The me who dreamed of a life far away from the circus, but no, all they saw was Ruby's obedient little puppet dancing on her strings. I thought back all to the times that smiled and nodded along with Ruby's demands, even when every fiber of my being wanted to say no. The countless moments I had bitten my tongue, swallowing my true feelings and opinions for the sake of keeping the peace and ensuring the money kept rolling in. Our subscribers didn't understand what it was like to live under Ruby's iron fist. They didn't know the consequences of stepping out of line. I'm not sucking up, I'm surviving, I thought. There's a difference. But was that the reason for Ruby not to love me? So throughout this book, like I said, you guys have to read this book because there's a lot that I'm not reading. But throughout this book, Shari really feels like Ruby truly does not love her. She doesn't understand why Ruby treats her this way, or even the rest of her siblings as well, right? But I can't imagine being in a household where you felt like your mom didn't love you and constantly wondering, did I do something wrong? Is there something I can do better? How can I get her approval? And doing that into your teenage life now. And I mean, in her adult life, she's probably like, well, fuck Ruby. Fuck Ruby now. I don't need her approval. I am my own person. I have got my own life going on. But having to deal with this when you're a kid, I can't imagine. But not only that, it's like I don't know, it's just like so compounded. It's like you're dealing with this abusive mom. You don't think she loves you. You don't understand why. You're doing your best. You're trying to be obedient. And then you've got your whole entire life on YouTube. Everyone has the impression that your family's perfect, that your mother is perfect, that your mother is a good mom. And you're reading all these comments that are, you know, like you might have good comments about you, but then there's also the negative comments about you. I don't know, like all this is just like so, it's just so unnatural. It's so much. I can't understand how anyone could ever go through this. We would force her mom. Hi, Kay. We would force her mom to be nice to us, but she knew what we're doing, so we definitely dealt with the consequences afterwards. Oh man, the one thing, it's like when you're going to the shopping mall, you get that like pinch, you know, that pinch, or like underneath the table, that pinch. Narcs can't love anyone. She is right. I think the effect of comments on Ruby was the exact opposite. Men probably fantasize about. Oh, okay. Oh gosh, this is horrible. Content. So Ruby goes up to Shari and she has wax. And, you know, Sherry's like, oh, great. Yay. Mom's filming it. Oh, great. She's going to make me want to do something. And I don't know. This is just like a lot of the times when you see these family vlogs, you see the thumbnails, the YouTube, it looks wholesome. It looks sweet. But then you got to remember what has to go on behind the scenes in order to capture that moment or that thumbnail or that shot, you know, like, oh gosh. So for example, I eyed the wax strips suspiciously. So again, she comes up with these wax strips. I couldn't help but wonder, was this a moment of possible mother-daughter bonding or just another scene in our never-ending family sitcom? The line between genuine interaction and performance had blurred so completely that sometimes I wasn't sure any of us could tell the difference anymore. Come on, Shari, it'd be great for our video. I'll give you $100. Okay, you can wax my eyebrows. The pain was nothing compared to the horror show I witnessed in the mirror afterwards. Ruby had waxed off half of my left eyebrow, leaving a sharp 90-degree angle that made me look like I was perpetually shocked with my own reflection. Who needs symmetry when you can rock the Spock meets surprise squirrel look? I was mortified, of course, but Ruby kept the camera rolling, zooming into my face like she was documenting a rare species of unibrow teen in its natural habitat. The money shot, indeed. Shari, I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, her voice quivering with what I'm sure was remorse, but definitely not barely contained glee at striking content gold. Sure enough, the video titled, Shari, I'm so sorry, with a thumbnail of me mid-ugly cry, racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Wonderful, I thought. I've always wanted to be famous for my crazy eyebrows. I had to wear huge glasses for the next few weeks to hide my mother's handiwork. I don't recall ever seeing that $100 either. And you know, something tells me that maybe she did it on purpose. Maybe Ruby purposely made it extra ugly. That way it would be, oh man, this is such good content. The thumbnail is going to be so good. Shari's going to cry a little bit. I don't know. It just goes back to, do you guys, I remember there was this video about this woman who, she was like in a car with her son, and then she was trying to get a shot of him crying or something like that. And then I think she wasn't, was it one of those things where the editors left it in just to show the world how disgusting the family was? But I remember she was trying to get her son to cry and she wasn't getting the shot that she wanted. You think she did it on purpose? Yeah, probably. And it's like, do I care that, you know, the internet's going to see this? Do I care that my daughter's going to go to school with this jacked up eyebrows? Because like, one of the worst things you can do is like ruin someone's eyebrows, like, you know, like visually, right? Yeah, if your eyebrows are on your face, there's nothing you can do about it. You can try to fill in with pencil, stuff like that, but you can tell there's a chunk of your eyebrow missing. No, it wasn't the Ace family. I didn't recognize this family. Listen, I know the Ace family, they be doing stuff too, okay? There's this video that there's this YouTuber that I watch that covers all the Ace family drama. Oh, you know what? This is, I want to include this because I love Lord of the Rings. I'm glad that she brought up Lord of the Rings. So the cool thing is, she got to read Lord of the Rings in school. I don't remember, I don't think we had any cool books like that we read in our school curriculum. In the lesson, we debated which character to be as Christ figures, how the hobbits represented the purity of childhood, embodying a love for simple joys of nature, play, food, and companionship, and how it was their inherent goodness that allowed them to carry the ring without being immediately corrupted. I especially love Sam, the sweet, hobbity cinnamon roll, that loyal little potato, too good, too pure for this world. I wish I could have had a friend like him. So, Shari, our teacher said, his keen gaze settling on me, what do you believe the ring symbolizes at its core? I began, my voice quavering before finding its strength. I think it symbolizes the duality within all of us, our capacity for great good and great evil. Hey, Lauren, how are are you doing today? Thanks for popping in. Thank you so much for the midweek love. How are you? I hope you've been well. I think it symbolizes duality within all of us, our capacity for great good and great evil. That's good, Shari. Could you elaborate? The classroom fell silent, every eye trained on me, the new girl. The words poured out of me in a rush. It's like the ring is inherently neutral, you know? It's what we choose to do with it that matters. I pause, my heart hammering against my ribcage. Look at how the ring corrupts Gollum. I think it's a warning, Tolkien reminding us never to let our selfishness consume us until we lose sight of what really matters. Even as I spoke, an image of Ruby flashed in my mind, the way social media had her in its thrall, the lens of her iPhone, camera seeing everything, like Sauron, the giant flaming eyeball of doom. My teacher nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. So, Shari, if the ring represents her capacity for evil, for destruction of self and others, what is the opposite? Love, I said. The word carried more weight than I intended. Kindness, the kind of bond that Sam and Frodo share that endures through all hardship, the kind of love I yearned for but rarely felt at home. Stared out of my book, cheeks flushed, I felt exposed if I've revealed too much. But when I looked up, the teacher was smiling. Yes, Shari, I think Tolkien himself would appreciate that interpretation. So I had to include that because, you know, I guess I love Lord of the Rings. All right, so at this point, the 8 Passengers channel finally hits 1 million followers. Do you guys remember how many subscribers they had before ultimately the channel was shut down? Was it like 3 million subscribers? That same month, I started my new school in September. So now in September 2017, Ruby had hit a huge milestone of 1 million subscribers. Wow, she had 1 million subscribers 2.5 years after launching their channel. Oh my goodness. Wow. Shari, honey, she called out, her tone saccharine sweet. Are you throwing up? Does your gut hurt like you're nauseated? Yes, I groaned, my throat feeling like I swallowed broken glass. I knew she was filming this. I could tell by her tone. Forget chicken soup and cold compress, Mom, I thought. What I really needed is a camera rolling while I'm puking my guts out in a bucket. I heard Ruby continue to cheerfully address her viewers, her voice filled with excitement. Good morning, passengers. Today's exciting, crazy day. Number 1, we're counting down to 1 million. Number 2, Shari doesn't feel good. I'm going to get her to see a doctor to see if she has strep. Later that day, she filmed herself running errands, her eyes darting the road and her phone as her subscriber count climbed steadily towards the big number, 998,000, 999,000. When the counter hit 1 million, she pulled over, filled with emotion, and triumphantly addressed her viewers. It's perfect. Hitting this milestone while doing little things, that's what makes mothers powerful. In her mind, buying Chad's cheese, mailing my package, driving to the doctors, those were her superpowers. The everyday acts that build her empire. 1 million subscribers earned between errands. The video cut to me at urgent care, visibly weak and exhausted. I tried to smile for the camera. Years of conditioning had taught me to always be pleasant, always be amiable for Ruby, no matter how crappy I felt. At that point, I think I was running a temperature of 102. For once, smiles weren't what Ruby wanted. You can't smile while you're in the insecure, Shari, Ruby chided, her voice a mixture of playfulness and command. You're supposed to look like you're on your deathbed. I complied instantly. Feigning death was a touch of theatrically that I knew would please her, whatever she wanted. So on the 15th birthday, Shari gets, so I think at this point it's been 3 years since I've been doing the family vlogs, right? So on her 15th birthday, Shari gets a tripod. And of course, Ruby has a camera shoved in her face. She's filming everything. 8 Passengers had around about 2 million subscribers at this point. And so the camera shoved in her face, she's opening her presents, and it's a tripod. Ruby says, "You're welcome." Now, why would Shari need a new equipment? And then Shari blurts out, because I have a channel. Now, what I didn't cover before is that Shari actually makes her own YouTube channel. And she was asking, Ruby was like, hey, Mom, you know, can you give me a shout out? Can you link my channel down below in the description? And Ruby's like, no, I'm not doing that for you. I'm not giving you a helping hand. You're going to have to earn this all by yourself. So instead of having Shari, you know, getting like a little lift in her channel, she's like, nope, you do it yourself, because it was probably that sentiment where it's like, well, if I had to do it all myself, so should you, Shari. Like, that is just the type of annoying person that Ruby was. So Ruby said that she wouldn't shout out Shari until Shari reaches 100,000 subscribers. And when she did, that's when finally Ruby's like, okay, fine, I'll shout you out now. You're worthy enough now. And I think when Shari tried to ask her mom to shout her out when she first started her channel, Ruby was like, well, I don't even work with like small content creators. I only work with like big people. I only shout at the big people. Like, oh God, Ruby's just so fucking insufferable. So Shari's at 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. Shari was getting about a few $1,000s per month now. Ruby one day says, by the way, she said casually, months after I started earning, I'm taking 10% of the top off the top for management fees. You really think I would ever let you start a YouTube channel, let alone a successful one, without my help? You owe me, Shari. Business is business. 2018, she talks about the time where Chad, I guess, ruined a family vacation. There was a sponsorship that was happening. They were supposed to go to Universal Studios. And so Ruby told them that we're going to make a big mess so that we can show how well wet ones work. If you guys don't know what wet ones are, they're like the little wet wipes that you use. We made it gross. Gummy bears smeared on the windows, slime everywhere, chocolate all over everyone's faces. Oh my gosh. All to demonstrate the effectiveness of wet ones. However, I guess Chad took it way too far and he was being an absolute punk, is what Ruby said. Making constipated gargoyle faces, photobombing her carefully orchestrated brand content. Ruby's dream of picture-perfect family content was rapidly devolving into a blooper reel. So she banished him to the hotel room while the rest of us enjoyed the theme park. So they're all supposed to go to Universal together. However, little did they know, Chad, very smart kid, Chad sneaks out of the hotel room. He takes a taxi. He somehow sweet-talked his way into Universal Studios, and he ended up going all by himself. I'm surprised he never ran into the family somehow. So when they get back to the hotel room, they realize Chad was gone. They were trying to find him, but then they find out that Chad just snuck out and did his own thing. So at this point, they were already considered to send Chad to West Point Military Academy because, you know, Chad was the troublemaker. He was the prankster, and he was someone seen as not obedient. Shari writes this, looking back, my parents should have probably just given Chad the space and time to grow, and time he needed to grow up. But no, Ruby and Kevin couldn't fathom such a simple solution. Instead, they doubled down, more determined than ever to find a Chad whisperer, someone aggressive enough to break through his defense. Oh, by the way, I picked this up in the very beginning of the book. So initially when she talks about Kevin, I was like, okay, she's talking about Kevin because this is when Kevin is not her father yet. Kevin met Ruby. But throughout the book, she will refer to Kevin as Kevin, not as dad. Even though it seems like they have, forgiven each other and she's like on his healing journey with her father, right? But Kevin is referred to as Kevin, not his dad. And so this is how we get Jodi Hildebrandt into the picture because they were desperate. They wanted to find someone that could fix Chad, to find the perfect person to crack his code, to rewire him to their liking, which is how the monster came into our lives. A monster masquerading as a mental health professional armed with a tight smile and a mind full of psychological warfare tactics. A monster who would see my mother's inner darkness and cultivate it, nurture it, until it eclipsed all light. A monster named Jodi Hildebrandt. Now we're on part 3 of the book. The book is, I think its book is separate into 5 parts. Part 1 is like the family background. I think part 2 is like the childhood. Part 3 is entering Jodi into their lives. That's all I can think of too. Jodi Hildebrandt in her damn khaki shorts. Monster indeed. The title of this chapter is Snake in the Garden. So this talks about how Jodi became therapist for Chad, how Chad was, I think, sent to Anasazi, which is the camp, the wilderness teenage camp that a lot of people were very angry at Kevin and Ruby for deciding to send him over there. I don't know if Anasazi is still a thing. And then it gets into a little bit of Jodi's history because Shari is a very, very smart teen. And she does look into this Jodi person because she's curious, like, oh, like, who is this Jodi person who's, giving therapy to my family? All right, so background history on Jodi. Licensed clinical mental health counselor, Jodi had built a reputation in Utah's LDS community as something of a miracle worker. Her Connections program promised to help people overcome everything from porn addiction to distorted thinking. She preached a philosophy based on 3 core principles: impeccable honesty, rigorous personal responsibility, and vulnerable humility. Jodi Hildebrandt has forever ruined the words truth and distortion for me. Anytime I want to use the word distortion, I'm like, oh God, I keep thinking of like Jodi Hildebrandt. I hate that word now. It's the same thing with Sarah Boone and the word unintentional, right? I can't use the word unintentional now without thinking of stupid Sarah Boone. Hey Tyrone, how are you doing today? Tyrone says, I've never been convinced on Kevin. He never came off as a real father, but I wasn't there, so it's just my opinion at the end of the day. Intrigued by the idea of turning Chad from Dennis the Menace into LDS poster child, Ruby immediately set up a Zoom call for Chad and Jodi. This was taking place in the hotel room in Orlando during their Orlando trip. So Jodi reported back to Ruby, expressing confidence in her ability to make progress with Chad if my parents committed to weekly one-on-one calls between him and Jodi. Oh, and she has some other ideas for his immediate rehabilitation, including sending away to Anasazi, a wilderness therapy program in Arizona for troubled teens. Jodi painted Anasazi as a transformative experience, a place where Chad could shed his rebellious ways and emerge as the obedient, spiritually aligned son where my parents craved. It sounded like a miracle cure-all promising to fix every conceivable teenage problem, a bit of fresh air, and wilderness survival skills. Sorry, I'm wearing contacts today, and they're like not great right now. Now, how much exactly was this wilderness camp? $13,945 for just 45 days of treatment. Holy shit. But you know what? When you have a lot of money and you think that you could fix your kids, nothing, right? It's nothing. They were knees deep, more than that. They were very heavy into the YouTube money, sponsorships and all that. So they had a lot of money. True to form, Ruby and Kevin couldn't resist recording a video to explain their decision. I think I watched this video actually when they were explaining why they sent Chad to this Anasazi camp. So again, they painted Chad as some kind of juvenile delinquent. He's in desperate need of an attitude overhaul. Kevin, though, uncharacteristically took the lead, his voice stern as he laid out the situation. I could almost see Ruby's puppet strings controlling his words. And then Ruby took center stage. Chad needs to develop some very basic maturity and skills. This is a chance for a reset, a fresh beginning. The idea with wilderness therapy is that you can survive with these peers in the wilderness with nothing more than the clothes on your back and a couple field supplies, and then nothing in this world that you can't tackle. As Ruby spouted this nonsense, I watched Kevin nodding along with the right moments, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt perhaps. He later claimed he disagreed at the time, but eventually before falling in line. In that moment, though, he was a perfect, supportive husband, backing up his wife's delusions. Now, like I mentioned, Shari's going to do her research. Shari's going to look up Jodi. And I didn't know that Jodi's information was already out. Like, all the negative stuff about her was already out on the internet. I thought it came out when the story came out with the... Well, actually, no. I think... Were you able to just Google this and find out the stories about Jodi Hildebrandt? Because I thought the story was really, all the light was shed on Jodi Hildebrandt when Adam Paul Steed came out on the Mormon Stories podcast. But I guess they were able to, like, you can just look up Jodi Hildebrandt connections and see if there's like threads about her. But look at what Shari found. So Shari goes to Chad because, she's like, well, Chad is now having Jodi as a therapist. Shari, of course, is like very concerned about this. And she tells Chad, Jodi's not cool. Like, she's bonkers. You should see the stuff online. She's practically a con artist. Chad, of course, goes and tells his mother, and Ruby comes, and she's like pissed. She comes and she says, how dare you sabotage your brother's progress? He's getting help. And honestly, Shari, you could probably use some help too. Shari responds, I don't need help from Jodi. Ruby says, yes, you do. You don't like Jodi. Anybody who doesn't like Jodi is hiding something. And that's something that's going to really take her, that type of mindset is going to take her very far into the whole delusion. Anyone who doesn't like Jodi is hiding something. It means you're threatened by the truth she speaks. Oh, gosh. Ruby nodded sagely, so she doesn't part of the wisdom of the ages. So that is how Shari also has Jodi as her therapist. So we got Chad, now we got Shari, and I'm sure maybe Jodi was also doing maybe like the relationship between Ruby and Kevin as well. Jodi had already lost her license when she met Ruby. I thought, yes, she did. She did lose her license. I just wasn't sure if that was like all out on the internet. I thought all this was like confidential, but maybe Adam Paul Steed had already spoken out publicly about Jodi Hildebrandt. But Mom, she had her license suspended. Her own kids don't speak to her. Her kids couldn't handle the truth. She's been called... Oh, sorry, this is Ruby who's responding. Her kids couldn't handle the truth. She's been called by God to help people. Ruby's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. She was sold on Jodi. Hook, line, and sinker. So we're going to talk about connections a little bit. Oh, God, connections. So... cringe. I mean, you guys have seen their Instagram. I think their Instagram is still up though, because I think if you want to shut down Instagram, I think you have to be either Ruby or Jodi. I think it's still up though, right? I'm surprised Pam Bochner didn't go on there to try to take the channel down or the Instagram down. But when you go on their Instagram, when you go on their Facebook, like, oh my God, it's just so, I mean, saying cringe doesn't even begin to encompass the entirety of it. So in Connections, again, run by Jodi Hildebrandt, the thing that they like to focus on is, I guess, the relationship between the husband and the wife. And usually it's the accusation that the husband is cheating. Now, what constitutes as cheating? According to Jodi Hildebrandt, noticing the mailman was attractive. So one day, Ruby was like, oh my God, like there's someone in my support group and like she's totally cheating on her husband. It's like, oh, like how is she cheating on the husband? Oh, because she thought the mailman was attractive. In Connections, warp reality is constituted in Connections Warp Reality, this constituted infidelity. Jodi's teachings were extreme. A married man talking to a female coworker could be unfaithful. Glimpsing attractive people online might be classified as porn addiction. Only absolute purity of thought was acceptable. In Jodi's rigid world, innocence was rare. Those deemed distorted, usually husbands, were told to abandon their families to work on themselves alone. Jodi seemed to specialize in guiding wives to distance themselves from their husbands, probably because she was trying to get close to the wives. Okay, let's just be real. Let's be honest about that. Or kicking them out entirety. Connections language framed it as inviting him to leave code for, I'm going to make you isolate yourself from everyone you know except Jodi. It's like so crazy. Jodi, someone who is no longer, like, I think she was like no longer speaking to the father of her children. And she also did not have connections to her children as well, her 2 kids. It's like, why were people taking therapy advice from this woman where her own kids weren't even speaking to her? You know, it's like, I think she just hated children. I think she just hated husbands. And she wanted to make sure everyone, I don't know, it's as if she wanted everyone to feel what she went through. Like, okay, isolate your kids, isolate your husbands. I don't know. It's like she was so angry with her own personal situation that she found ways to punish other people's kids and husbands. The separations typically lasted 6 months, the minimum time Jodi deemed necessary to demonstrate genuine change. And you know what? There were some people that were separate for more than 6 months. I remember Jodi was boasting on a Facebook post or something, or was it on Instagram, where she's like, oh my God, they were separate for 2 years and now they're back together and they love each other even more. Like 2 fucking years? My goodness. Her logic was that anyone could fake remorse and make short-term adjustments, but sustaining change for half a year provided sincere transformation. Adults were essentially put on probation in their relationships, expected to prove their worth to Jodi to earn back the privilege of family closeness. The 6-month rule also applied to kids, and any significant transgression could result in half-year sentence of restricted privileges, increased scrutiny, and constant pressure to demonstrate change. To kids, too. So, you know, Ruby is drinking the fucking Kool-Aid. Ruby is like, oh my God, Connections is life-changing. Oh my God, I worship fucking Jodi. She's my fucking God. Ruby began promoting Connections events to her audience. It was framed as an exciting opportunity for self-improvement. Her followers, already primed to trust her advice, began to show interest in these new ideas, even though they couldn't see how Connections was already destroying our family. For instance, Jodi decided that Chad wasn't improving fast enough, so she told the parents to immediately pull him out of track and football, crushing all his teenage dreams. For Chad, track and football were his lifeline, his ticket to a brighter future. He had won first place in the district 100-meter dash, also in the 200-meter dash. Coaches whispered about his potential. The dream of football or track scholarship seemed within reach. It was more than a way to just pay for college. It was Chad's chance to prove to himself, to carve out an identity beyond the constraints of our family dysfunction. But one nod from Ruby and Kevin, Jodi's interference shattered all those dreams. How could Chad possibly commit to track and football when he couldn't even fully be responsible for himself? Nope. Chad would be barred from sports until he was fixed, and that would meant taking away the one thing that gave him purpose and joy. It's because Jodi had a knack of stripping people of their identity. If they're not complying, if they're not doing what she wants, what does she do? She strips them away of the things that they're proud of. She takes away their identity. She takes away their family members. these are just like all like slippery slopes of like slow manipulation tactics. And the fact that like Kevin and Ruby were just like eating this up is just so disappointing. I mean, Ruby Ruby was probably delighted. Now it gets into the part where she starts cutting off the family members, mostly the family members on Ruby's side of the family. So again, Ruby is the eldest. She's got three other sisters, and then a younger brother as well. Now, the cutting off the family didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like instant or anything like that. It was something that happened over a period of, I think, like, was it 2 to 3 years that she mentioned? Suddenly, Ruby's wounded inner child emerged, raw, angry, recalling incidents that she had long buried, sending shockwaves through the entire Griffiths clan. None of them had shown an interest in joining connections, despite Ruby's glowing reviews. Increasingly, though, Ruby felt that unless they embraced connections, healing would never be possible. So it's almost as if like, oh, if you don't join connections, if you're not gonna be a part of connections, my healing journey, I want nothing to do with you. It's almost like she was trying to hold them hostage and get them to be a part of connections. And if not, then okay, well, I'm gonna cut you off. I'm glad they didn't join connections. This severing didn't manifest overnight, though. It took about 2 or 3 years before Ruby would cut ties entirely with her family. And as I watched Ruby delete contact after contact from her phone, I couldn't help but wonder, was this healing? Probably not. I understand cutting off family members if they're toxic. You don't want these people in your lives, but if you have someone that's manipulating you and they are egging you on to cut off people in your life, it's possible that you're being manipulated. It's possible that they're trying to engage in isolation. That way, you're isolated. There's no one else around you that's close. There's no one else that can challenge. Jodi in this specific example. And I think that's what Jodi wanted to do. Jodi wanted to slowly snip away all the things that were important around Ruby. And I'm not saying that, oh, Ruby is the only fucking victim here. Ruby is also the abuser as well. You guys got to remember that. She could also be a victim of Jodi, but at the same time, also be a participant. I think she was a willing participant. I think she was glad that she found someone like Jodi, because she was like, oh, wow, I finally found someone that was more harsh than I was. And yeah, she totally ate it all. I completely agree with you. Abusers alienate. Jodi alienates people, so she has total control. Yeah, I can't understand how anyone would believe her garbage. I mean, sometimes when you're feeling lost in your life and you're looking for guidance, sometimes it's hard to not eat up everything that you're consuming. And then like once you're like in the momentum of it, it's kind of hard to stop yourself, because it is nice to have answers in life, right? But unfortunately, sometimes when you're seeking those answers, you have these fuckers out there that are taking advantage of it. And sometimes they are abusive people. So right now we have... Sorry, I was like jumping around so many pages. So we're talking about isolation. So not only was this happening to Chad, this was also happening to Shari as well. So one evening, Ruby pulled me aside after dinner for a little talk. Shari, we're taking on a track so you can focus on what's really important, your personal development. I was stunned. Track was the only sport I truly enjoyed. Was being taken away from me? What will be next? Banning me from breathing? But why? You're not emotionally vulnerable with me, Ruby said. Oh, God, here comes the connection talks. Okay, guys, bear with me. There's a wall between us. Imagine how it would affect your husband in the future. You think any man wants to put up with that? A cold, shut-down wife? So throughout the book, Ruby will constantly remind Shari that she is not wife-worthy. Yes, Shari's like a fucking kid. Shari's like a fucking teenager. But she'll constantly tell her daughter that, oh, if you don't do this, you're not going to be worthy of being a wife. Your husband's going to hate you. You're going to be a shitty wife in the future. You got to do X, Y, and Z. And so she constantly keeps employing this, telling Shari that she's going to be unwanted, that no one's going to want her, over and over and over again. Shari says, I don't understand. Ruby says, Shari, you don't have empathy. You're not compassionate. As your parent, it's my job to help you fix your flaws before it's too late. That's why your father and I have decided to give you the gift of one-on-one sessions with Jodi. It's so wild to me. Ruby's like, I'm going to fix you, your damage. I'm going to fix you. And then not only that, she's basically saying, like, oh, here's the gift of one-on-one session with Jodi. Like, oh my God, getting the gift of one-on-one session with Jodi. No, thank you. I don't want this damn gift. But of course, Shari had to. Shari had to comply. Ruby says, the choice is yours, Shari. You either do one-on-one counsel with Jodi, or we take away your car, your phone, pull you out of school entirely. You decide. Ultimatums like this are so fucking disgusting. So Shari, of course, is angry, sad, she's crying. She goes in her room and she types in how to emancipate yourself from your parents. However, the thoughts that flood her minds are the where, what, and the who's, right? Where would I go? What would I do? Who would I be? I mean, when you're a child and you don't have your own source of income, you're being controlled by your parents, what can you really do? So now she's in this therapy with Jodi, and Jodi confronts her because Jodi knows what Shari said about her. Of course, Ruby's the one that went and go told on her. So this is how their therapy session starts. And the reason why I want to read it is because the therapy session with Jodi, I mean, you guys already know because you guys already seen the stuff that's being preached in Connections, but it's kind of interesting to see the glimpse of it, of her therapy tactics. All right, so Shari, Jodi began, her tone matter of fact. Let's dive right in. Our goal with this is to isolate and ultimately address the distorted thinking that is causing you to behave in a cold and entitled manner that is creating issues in the family. Can you tell me more about that from your perspective? Shari says, I don't know. I try really hard to be a good person. Jodi says, but are you a good person? Shari says, yeah, I think so. How do we know for sure? Jodi says, everyone has areas where they can grow. Questioning yourself rigorously is a healthy start. It shows self-awareness. And again, this is like slowly chipping away at Shari's confidence, giving her doubts, planting these seeds of doubts in her mind so that she's like, okay, well, have you ever considered that you're wrong? Here, let me give you the answers. I'm the one that you should be looking to for guidance. Shari says, I agree with that. Actually, I question myself all the time. It's kind of a problem. Jodi says, but are you asking yourself the right questions, Shari? I don't think so. Otherwise, why would we be here? Now, before they hang up, Jodi confronts Shari about what Shari said to Chad and what Ruby learned. She says, yes, before we hang up, I'd like to address something, Shari. I heard you had some disparaging things to say about me. Oh, crap. Blood rushed to my cheeks. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Don't be sorry. Be real. Fine, yes, I had some concerns. I said, be honest, Shari. You are spreading gossip, lies, rumors. Would you consider that to be compassionate behavior? Or do you prefer to blindly believe everything you see on the internet? I mean, if it's the truth, I started feeling like I was walking into a verbal minefield. Oh, you're going to learn about the truth, Shari. You'll love it. Chad does, and he's much better now, isn't he? So she's continuing doing therapy with Shari, and I think this is her way of destroying Shari's self-esteem. And what Jodi's going to do is Jodi's going to build it back up in her own image. On our second call, Jodi listened intently as I read from my list of distorted thinking episodes for that week. So here is the list of distorted thinking that Shari documents. And my God, it is to have to analyze your every thought, your behavior, your actions like this. It would drive me crazy. So she's got Monday, jump to conclusions 3 times a day. Thought in black and white about hard tests 7 times. Competed with Sarah and assumed I was better at math than she. Tuesday, catastrophized about my upcoming presentation 4 times. Overgeneralized my abilities based on 1 bad grade 2 times. Personalized professor's general criticism of class performance 3 times. Wednesday, engage in should statements about my study habits 5 times. Magnified importance of minor social faux pas at faux pas. Is it pronounced faux pas? Faux pas, right? Magnified importance of minor social faux pas at lunch 2 times. Discounted positives and feedback on my essay draft 3 times, and so on. Jodi sighed when I finished, her voice heavy with disappointment. Clearly, you have serious issues with adulation, she said. I don't understand, I whispered, frustrated. Adulation is when you think you're better than everybody else. Denigration is the opposite. Most people lean toward one or the other. It's clear to me you heavily lean towards adulating. But I thought, if anything, I tend to self-denigrate. But at your core, it's the opposite, Shari. So Jodi informed me for the next week's homework, I would have to write down every instances of self-adulation. So again, Shari makes a list. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday, felt smug when I answered a question in class that no one else could. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being proud of that. Sadly, congratulate myself for using whom correctly in a sentence. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Thought I was better than others for reading a book above my grade level. Yeah, you're proud of your achievements. Tuesday, felt superior for finishing the math test first. Privately judged classmates for their music tastes. Believe I was more mature than my peers for enjoying documentaries. Wednesday, felt proud of my extensive vocabulary during presentation. Thought I was special for understanding complex scientific concept quickly. Sadly criticized others' grammar mistakes in group chat. So these are things that she feels proud about. But then Jodi's like, oh, no, you're self-adulating. You should be a little bit more, maybe more humble. But I mean, these are all like private thoughts in her head. So Jodi says, okay, this is much better, Shari. So 5 weeks later, this is 5 weeks in, her eyes are scanning the page meticulously. Now, I'm going to teach you a very important technique, a way to transmute the adulation into something useful. Okay, I said, my voice filled with eagerness that was surprising even to my own ears. Next time you identify your adulation, Shari, I invite you to explore its opposite. Jodi continued. Think of it as a balancing exercise. So I should self-denigrate instead? Very good, Shari. So let's say you assume you're going to ace a test because, of course, you think you're so very clever. Change the language in your mind. Flip it. Think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail this test because I'm a stupid little girl. I'm a very stupid little girl. Excuse me? Yes, I want you to imagine what it feels like to fail the test. Really inhabit the feeling. I hesitated, my stomach churning. Failing a test? Was she kidding? I've never done that in my life. It was outside everything I knew. Shari, be humble. You're far less clever than you think you are. Now tell me how that feels. Be honest. I took a shaky breath, tried to imagine what it feels like to not understand my favorite books. Confusion and frustration washed over me. This sucks? Good, what else? How do you feel? I feel scared, exposed. There it is. You feel vulnerable. Vulnerability is what Shari Franke experienced when she realizes she's not right about everything. And that, my dear, is what we call living in truth. It's like, that was her purpose of therapy. That was her revelation. That Shari, you're not smart. You're not right about everything. You're not as clever as you think you are. This is her slowly chipping away and destroying Shari's self-esteem and her self-reassurance. So again, Jodi destroys her self-esteem. That way they can turn to Jodi for guidance. She obviously doesn't like people that are know-it-alls. She doesn't like confident people. And how does she handle people who are like that? She slowly chips it away. She destroys their worldview in order to rebuild. Rebuild it in Jodi's own vision. I don't know. I wrote a note that she's like a SimCity god. She's like destroying all these buildings and she's rebuilding them up in her own fucking view. And this is how I think she controls people and how she manipulates people. Now, there are people that probably went through with connections. They're probably like, oh, like this is not for me. Like, what the fuck is she doing? Like, I don't know. And they were able to get out of it. However, Shari didn't have a choice. She couldn't get out of it. Chad couldn't get out of it because their parents were pushing them to be in it. If she wasn't going to participate in the connection shit, in the therapy with one-on-ones with Jodi, then what they would do, they would take away her car, her phone, pull her out of school. Like, that's such a weird threat to be throwing at your kids. I'm going to pull you out of school, the school that you love going to, your friends, your, all that stuff, if you don't do one-on-one, if you don't do what I want to do. Poor kids, so destabilizing. Yeah, it's like, not only are you dealing with your fucking mom, who's fucking abusive, now she's got Jodi in her life. And I feel bad for her because Shari, the main villains are Jodi and Ruby. But, sorry, I said Ruby, right? Sorry if I mix up the names. Ruby and Jodi. Shari's gonna have another third person, a fucking predator, who takes advantage of her and her situation, and it's fucking horrible. So now that Shari is part of the whole connections things, right? She is eating up everything that Jodi has given her because she's like, oh, wait, actually, maybe Jodi does have some good points. Now, just because someone has good points doesn't mean everything they're telling you is true. But not only that, it's like she's also getting the approval from her mother, the approval that she always felt like she never really got, the love that she never really got. So there's this one time where she's talking to her friend and she's starting to realize that her circle of friendship is slowly getting smaller and smaller. And it's probably because people don't want to be around preaching, condescending people who are judgmental. And Shari quickly realized that she was becoming one. And so the friend tells her that, like, oh, I made out with like 3 boys over the past weekend. Someone called me a whore. What do you think? And so Shari says, what was your motive for kissing all those people? I asked icily. She looked at me like I had sprouted horns. Motive? They were cute. Why does there need to be some sort of deep reason? I mean, again, they're like teenagers, right? I gave her my best connections look, a perfect blend of condescension and pity. And I could totally see that. These people that are in the connection circle, it's like you got the condescension, you got the pity, but you got to make sure the condescension is not too overt. That way it might turn them away. Just got to have just a little bit of it, So perfect blend of condescension and pity. As your friend, I must ask, what does a kiss actually mean to you? What part of your ego was it serving when you chose to share yourself in that way? She shrugged me off, her eyes narrowing. Shari, why are you interrogating me? I'm just curious. You're judging. You're being so mean. I thought you were one of my friends. Don't you remember when you're the one going around kissing boys? Truth grows. True growth comes from confronting our deepest flaws. Are you willing to do the work? Like, imagine if you're confiding with your friend, especially if you're like a teenager, and then your friend gets all like therapeutic, you know, kind of like righteous on you, and you're just like, "Ooh, okay, I'm not going to talk to you again." So, at this point, Shari, I think she was kind of feeling proud of herself, you know, because she's like preaching this whole connections thing, and she goes to Ruby and tells Ruby about it. And Ruby's like proud of her. She's like, "Wow, I'm so proud of you. That was so truthful, loving of you to reflect that your promiscuous friend." Shari says, "So you don't think it was bad that I asked her what her motives were?" Ruby says, "No, that was a good question of you to ask Shari." And how did she respond? Well, she kind of got upset. Can you see how that's a reflection of distortion? She wasn't comfortable with your questions, even though you were reflecting the truth. My sweet Shari, you're so brave and clever. So, you know, Shari's like in this like vicious cycle where she's, you know, preaching like, I don't know. It's like in order to get Ruby's approval, it's mainly Ruby. In order to get Ruby's approval, it's like she has to, you know, preach this whole connection stuff because Jodi's like feeding it into her, and then Ruby is the one who's approving it. And it's like this whole cycle of like her just trying to please the people that are around her. But these people are like manipulative, crazy, fucking batshit people. Shari writes this: "I wasn't brave or clever. I was just riding high on my wave of self-righteous connection zeal. That's what's like being in a cult, like connections feels like you're special, like no one else understands the special knowledge that you have. It's addictive. My eyes were sharp and my tongue sharper as I sought out the imperfect, distorted, filled soul that crossed my path." And I think that's how it feels with like people who are like deep into like these like conspiracy theories as well. Sometimes it's like, "Ooh, we're the only ones that know about this. We're special. No one else do. I have this special knowledge, and now I can impart it on other people." In my eyes, I was a crusader for the truth, a warrior of enlightenment, determined to expose the flaws and weaknesses of those around me. In other words, I was a mean, judgmental scold, but I couldn't see that. I didn't care if I lost every friend I had, if it meant hearing praise fall from my mother's lips. I drank in this new, hard-won approval like a flower turning towards the sun. My whole life, all I ever wanted was to be seen and truly appreciated by my mother. With Jodi's teaching as my guide, it seemed as though now I was learning how to access all the love and acceptance I've been craving for so long. Finally, Ruby liked me. Some days, it almost felt like we were friends. So now we're in 2019, and again, the channel is still successful. It's still growing. They end up buying this 3-story house. I think it's the house that is currently their house right now, the one that got kicked down and all that stuff. It's a 3-story house. 7 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, like holy shit, like a fucking McMansion. They have a new dog that's a Cavapoo. What's a Cavapoo again? The Henry Cavill dog, right? And a poodle. We talked about Cavapoos on my stream before. Is that what it is? Cavapoo? Remember the Cavapoo, because something happens to the Cavapoo. So they have a Cavapoo named Dwight. For all its grandeur, the house felt oddly sterile. Spacious, yet confining, modern, yet soulless. A house built for show, not for living. Ruby's obsession with, a Cavalier Spaniel? Oh, is that what it is? What do I think? I thought it was like a Henry Cavill dog. Or is Henry Cavill like a former dictator or something, or king? Okay, I don't know. Thank you, Kay. I appreciate that. My special knowledge is that others refuse to see. Cilantro is delicious. Oh, it's so good. Cilantro. No, there are some people whose taste buds, like when they eat cilantro, it tastes like soap to them. Same thing with like, you know, when you eat asparagus, some people have a gene where if you eat asparagus and then you pee, they can smell the certain smell of it. For me, I don't have that gene. So when I eat asparagus and I pee, it doesn't smell like anything to me. Oh, no. Oh, you're right. Henry Cavill. Yeah, Henry Cavill's the one who plays The Witcher. Okay, ignore me. Ignore me. They're wrong. What? I think they can't help it, though. I think there's like something with their DNA where to them cilantro tastes like ass, which I feel so bad because cilantro is like one of the greatest things ever. I love cilantro. All right, where are we? So we're in 2019. They bought this giant house. All right, so she's describing the house, and it's really sad because living in a house, it's supposed to feel like you're lived in, especially when there's a bunch of kids running around. But to me, it just seems like the house was just basically a set for the YouTube channel. The lighting in our house was clinical, rows of bright white studio lights instead of warm, homey fixtures. It made everything look clean, pristine, and lacked warmth. Like everything else in our lives, it was designed for the camera, not for comfort. We weren't even allowed to decorate our rooms or put up posters. Ruby feared tape would rip up the nails, would rip the paint, or nails would damage the walls. The whole place felt more like a showroom than a house. It's like, this is a house you own, you're not renting it, and you can just fix it. If there's like, if the tape ruins the paint, or like if there's like holes in the wall, you can easily just patch it up. It's not even that hard. I don't do home stuff, but you know, I know that's easy to do. We're in the pandemic time, May of 2020, and I wonder if this was happening, if this wasn't happening during the pandemic, if they would have got so harshly canceled. So in May of 2020, there's a video titled "What We Haven't Told You." Chad dropped a bomb that would soon detonate our family's carefully curated image. So I think at this point, it's been like 5 years that the 8 Passengers YouTube channel has been running, since 2015. He mentioned casually that he'd been sleeping on the beanbag on the basement floor for 7 whole months on Jodi's advice. Oh, that was Jodi's advice? Oh shit, I totally missed on the book. I thought it was Ruby who came up with this idea. It was Jodi. Oh man, Jodi's the one that brings the channel down. Oh no. On Jodi's advice, Ruby removed Chad's bedroom privileges as punishment for a continued defiance. His options? Pull out guest bed, inflatable mattress, or whatever. That whatever became a beanbag in the basement. 7 nights, 210 days on a beanbag. Ruby saw nothing unusual about this. Chad acted like he didn't care. It was a masterclass in emotional suppression, a skill we'd all been forced to perfect. When he let slip out during filming what was his current sleeping arrangement, he did so coolly. I doubt Ruby even really noticed. I could have sworn Ruby commented on it though. Wasn't Ruby like, "Oh yeah, like, you know, what did you get in trouble for? Oh, pranking your brother?" And it wasn't that the same. Wait, was that the same video where they mentioned how they didn't have phones, everything was taken away during the summertime, all their devices were taken? Was that the same video, or is that a separate video? Do you guys remember? But Ruby's new editor did, and he made Chad's revelation the focus of the video, misguidedly thinking it would be interesting content. Ruby didn't hesitate to post it. Why would she? Jodi had been pumping her full of misplaced confidence, convincing her that her unique parenting philosophies are not just acceptable, but admirable. Yeah, she doubled down hard on this. In her mind, she wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a truth teller, a revolutionary parent. Ruby, high on Jodi's toxic positivity, was about to proudly display her son's dehumanization for millions to see. Even Dwight, our dog, had more comfortable sleeping arrangement. The internet went ballistic. Ruby's face paled as she scrolled through the comments. YouTubers, TikTokers were accusing her of child abuse. But this is all wrong. They don't understand. Ruby, Kevin suggested, maybe we should just take the video down so we don't lose subscribers. No. Jodi says we need to stand firm in our truth. We can't let the haters win. Oh my God. Oh, dude. Oh, man. And of course, when the backlash came, Jodi, was she like, oh shit, maybe I was wrong for me to do this? Was it wrong for me to suggest to have Chad sleep in the beanbag? No, Jodi had to double down even harder. And Jodi was probably the one, you know, pulling the puppet strings and telling Ruby. That one video burned down 8 Passengers' YouTube channel overnight. They lost about 90% of their income. Hundreds of thousands unsubscribed. Brands were distancing themselves from them. People have been asking for years how to raise such well-behaved children. She declared, chin held high. Now they know. They can't handle the truth. That's on them. Now, during this time, the internet, you know, we had a lot of time on our hands because it was the pandemic was happening. Things were closed. People were combing through all the fucking videos. So there was like 5 years worth of content. And remember, they were probably posting like multiple times throughout the week, maybe multiple times throughout the day. I don't know. There's probably so much content to post. But there was a lot of content to go through, and people were going through all of it. Some videos became infamous. Ruby threatening to behead my youngest sister's stuffed animals. An eye for an eye punishment after my youngest sister damaged something. I remember the day, the horror in my little sister's eyes, the mocking determination in Ruby's voice. Yeah, I don't know why people... I wonder what the comments were back then when that video came out, because that is fucking demented. There was one where she did that. There's another one where the youngest son was hungry, went to the kitchen, and like she was like, it was like so sad to see. He was like really fucking hungry, and she's like, "What did I tell you about going to the kitchen?" And then like meanwhile, she's like winking at the camera. She's like smiling and laughing, and like, oh, it's just so fucking gross. Ruby's rationale seemed to be, you murdered someone else's possession, so how would it feel if we murdered yours? Her approach intended to teach consequences totally disregarded the emotional capacities of a young kid because of her approach intended to teach consequences totally disregarded the emotional capacities of a young kid because for a children of 5, a stuffed animal is more than just a toy. It's a source of comfort, a loyal friend, a crucial coping mechanism for navigating the big, scary world around them. Threatening to guillotine a beloved buddy wasn't just punishment, it was emotional terrorism. Now, years later, thousands of strangers were revisiting the moment. Ruby posted a vlog where she bragged about how she couldn't bring a packed lunch to school for my youngest sister, who had forgotten hers that day. Yep, everyone. This is when I actually learned about Ruby and the 8 passengers, because I remember like there's a bunch of videos that were circulating on YouTube and on TikTok, and I remember seeing this woman. She was like in her car, and she's like, I'm not going to bring lunch to my youngest daughter. She has to pack her own lunch, and I hope no one else gives her lunch. Like, I don't know. It was just like so, it was bizarre when I was watching it during that time. So Ruby explained how the teacher had called her to say that she was uncomfortable with the youngest sister being hungry and wanted Ruby to drive and bring lunch over to her. I told the teacher, my daughter's responsible for making her own lunches in the morning. The natural outcome for forgetting your lunch is that you're going to be hungry. Ruby went on to say that she hoped that no one shared the lunch with her child that day. So it's not even just like consequences for your own actions. It's like she didn't even want other kids sharing their lunch with her own daughter who would have been hungry. She should go hungry in order to learn her lesson. Ruby tried to defend herself afterwards, saying the school was a 45-minute drive from her house. There was only 2 hours left of school that day, but that did nothing to calm down the masses. All they heard was Ruby's cold contempt for a hungry child. Yeah, because Ruby was going on and on about this, and it just felt so unnatural to have this mother talk about her daughter in such a way and not caring that she would go hungry. The punishment was just bizarre. What's wild to me is that when we see cases of child abuse, every time when they do the whole like house tour thing or like footage of the house, it's always like the kids were being starved. Meanwhile, the parents were eating like the shittiest foods. They were eating like honey buns. They had like ice creams locked up, like all this type of like junk food that the parents were just eating while the kids were fucking starving. And remember when we're going through Jodi Hildebrandt's house, you know, her fucking fortress of a house, she had like fucking like boxes and boxes and boxes of like cake mix, cupcake mix and frosting and like all the junk food, like the cereals and stuff like that. Like I remember like didn't she have like a lot of the cake mixes and the frosting and stuff like that? I was like, what the fuck is it? Like, this is not normal. Like I understand trying to prep for doomsday and like having like, you know, food available in case something happens, but like she just had like shit food, just like junk food everywhere. Yep, food restriction. Yeah, food restriction, cutting your kid's hair as punishment, like chopping off the hair like that, like weird red flags. I feel like we always see them in other child abuse cases. Angry viewers didn't just leave mean comments, they went after what remained of her family's livelihood. So again, they were calling BYU because Kevin Franke was working as a professor there. They were trying to cancel him. They were trying to demand that Kevin get fired. Someone started a change.org petition accusing the parents of abuse. And then Kevin and Ruby were canceled. And I remember they were trying to send cease and desist letters to content creators who were covering this. They were trying to get everyone to, you know, stop talking about it. CPS showed up at the house. Of course, they didn't find any signs of abuse. Nothing was done. Watching all this unfold, I felt conflicted. Part of me was glad others finally saw what I've known for years, but I was also worried if the public shame would only make Ruby double down on her strict methods. That's why canceling people becomes very dangerous, because there are people that reflect and they're like, oh shit, like did I fuck up? But then there are also people who are also become very defensive. They don't want to admit to the masses that they're wrong, right? And I mean, being canceled in its own stuff is also very unnatural. To have like a huge massive wave of hate coming at you, strangers from the internet and stuff like that. But you know, there are times where when someone gets canceled and you might have good intentions of hoping that they will change, no, sometimes they double down even more and they become even more of a monster, or they do a whole 180 flip. Oh, this is kind of interesting because I think this is how Ruby saw herself when she was initially arrested, and probably maybe even till this very day. So here's what happened. As the backlash intensified, Ruby's rage burned brighter, fueled by a mix of self-righteousness and victimhood. In her mind, she wasn't a controversial figure being held accountable. She was a martyr, crucified for her unwavering dedication to tough love. And I think when she was initially first arrested, I think she saw herself as a fucking martyr. And then she transitioned herself to becoming a victim. Like, oh, you know what? I was just being controlled. Now that I've not talked to Jodi in the past couple of weeks, I've woken up now. It's as if I was woken up from a haze. And she saw herself as a victim of Jodi. So as I do see her as like sort of a victim of Jodi's, but at the same time, she was also an active participant. I mean, it's like you participated in all the manipulation, all the abuse. Like, yeah, you were sucked into Jodi's teachings, but you ate it all up. You preached it. Jodi played her part with calculated precision, never questioning, always supporting, offering comfort to Ruby's wounded ego. And this was the perfect way for Jodi to sweep in and take further control. Because when someone is down in the dumps, when someone is being cornered, when you have someone that comes into your life, I mean, she was already part of her life, but when you have someone who is like constantly there in your corner supporting you, you know, Jodi is like the only support that Ruby had during that time. I mean, yes, she had her children, she had Kevin, but I mean, Kevin really, was he really providing, what did I want to say? What Kevin was probably providing to Ruby was probably not the same as what Jodi was providing to Ruby, because Kevin was like basically her like yes man, right? Someone that she can control. Same thing with her children, someone that she can control. Jodi, on the other hand, was someone that Ruby looked up to, someone that Ruby respected. She validated Ruby's every actions, every decision, and encouraged Ruby to move on to greener pastures. To hell with 8 passengers. So, I mean, Jodi was probably like, oh shit, like, you know, she was influential. She could have, like, you know, got more people into my connection circle, probably. But now that connections, or now that 8 passengers was, you know, dead, well, Jodi's probably happy as well, because, well, you know, now I have this mother that I can get. You know, she's still sort of influential, and we can still have her. We can now have her under my control, under my reign. And that's pretty much halfway throughout the book. That's where I will end here today. The first half of the book, I think a lot of it was, I mean, the stuff that I covered were things that we already had an inkling, that we already, you know, had suspicions of, like, oh, whether or not Ruby was already abusive from the very beginning. We wanted to know whether or not, because I mean, I think a lot of people were very curious, was like, you know, I think a lot of people had an inkling that the abuse mostly stemmed from emotional abuse, the manipulation, the tactics that she would employ in her kids. But I mean, all of it, what's interesting is that, like, you would think physical abuse hurts more. Like, yes, it might physically hurt more, but at the end of the day, it's the emotional abuse that really fucks with people. Like, yes, she was hitting her kids, she was smacking them, she was pinching them and stuff like that. But what really seems to take a toll on Shari, as she highlights in her book, is it's all the emotional abuse that she went through with her mother at a very, very young age. And that's snowballed even harder because of the whole YouTube stuff, having everything exposed to the world, and then having Jodi being introduced in her life. So we're about halfway throughout the book. I want you guys to read the book if you guys can. You know, read the book, listen to the audible. That way, next time when we cover the rest of the book, we can definitely chat about it. And then you guys, you know, it'd be interesting to hear your guys' perspective as well. So again, her book is available. I got it on Amazon. I ordered it. It came the next day. And she does have an audible as well, where she actually reads it in her own words, I found out today. So definitely, if you guys can, check it out. But other than that, we will go through the second half of the book a different day. But yeah, for her to have Ruby to deal with, and then Jodi to deal with, is crazy. And then, like I mentioned, the second half of the book, there's also another fucking person that she has to deal with. And this is a person that she was hoping she could lean on to, a person that could be like a father figure. And of course, that person ends up being fucking disappointing. So it's just super sad to have, to know that she went through all of this. And I think, you know, like, parts of this book could be relatable to some of you guys as well. Lauren says, I've been listening to the audiobook. Yes, it's heart-wrenching. Shari sounds like she's on the verge of tears the entire time. Yeah, there was parts of the book that I would read. So again, I'm only reading snippets of it to you guys. You guys have to read, like, the context in between, the slow build, the frustration, the sadness. So she ends up getting cut from the family, which you would think, oh, it's healthy for her. It's good that she's being cut. But at the same time, it's like, well, what about her siblings? Who's going to be there to protect her siblings? She's got 5 of those siblings to worry about. You know, I think Chad was kind of doing his own thing, but still, it's hard being the eldest when you're cut from the family, and when you're trying to either, you know, do your own thing, trying to focus on your own self. It's hard because you always have your siblings, your other family members that you're worried about. So I don't know, super sad. Oh no, a second father figure disappointment too. Yeah, this one's like pretty bad. But yeah, if you guys get a chance, get the book, and we'll be back maybe like next week. We'll cover the second half of the book. And yeah, and that's about it. I'm going to go eat because I'm fucking hungry. I'm starving. I'm starving. And then also my contacts, I don't know, they were getting a little bit blurry when I was like streaming. So I don't know if I should just not wear the contacts when I stream, or maybe my eyes are too dry and I wasn't blinking enough. I don't know.